The first thing that surprised me was how ordinary the room felt. Two desks pushed together, a cheap coffee machine humming in the corner, fluorescent lights that made everything look slightly tired. I had imagined something colder, maybe darker. But the office of the private investigators looked like any small workplace where people handled paperwork and routine problems, except the routine problem on their laptop was my marriage. The investigator, Mark, I think his name was, clicked the trackpad and the video resumed. A hotel hallway. My wife stepping out of an elevator. A man following a few seconds later. No music, no drama. Just quiet footage. I had prepared myself for anger. For that sudden rush people describe when betrayal becomes real. Instead, I felt embarrassed. Not for her. For myself. The investigators watched me carefully, probably expecting a reaction, something explosive. But all I could think about was how strange it was that the most private collapse of my life had become a file labeled with a date and location. Mark paused the video again. "You want to keep going?" he asked. I nodded. On the screen, she laughed at something the man said. Not a loud laugh, just a small one while checking her phone. The kind of moment you wouldn't notice in real life, but sitting there, watching it frame by frame, it felt heavier than anything else. That laugh didn't look like love. It looked like approval. And suddenly, a dozen small conversations from the past year started rearranging themselves in my head. Her comments about attention, about people who knew how to carry themselves, about how certain men in our social circles seemed more confident. At the time, I thought it was harmless observation. Now it sounded like evaluation. I leaned back in the chair. "Is he someone she knows well?" I asked. Mark exchanged a quick glance with his partner. "That's the interesting part," he said. He opened another file and turned the laptop slightly, so I could see more clearly. Photos, parking, lots, restaurants, a few meetings in public places. Then one photo stopped me. I knew the man. Not well, but enough. His name was Daniel. We had crossed paths at networking events, charity functions, mutual friends' dinners. The kind of person who always seemed to be orbiting the same professional circles. Friendly, competitive. The type who measured rooms. Mark watched my expression carefully. "You recognize him?" "Yes," I said. Mark nodded slowly, as if confirming something he already suspected. "We noticed that." He pulled up another document. Dates and locations aligned with events I had attended too. Conferences, fundraisers, social gatherings. The pattern became obvious. This wasn't random. It had started in places where we were both present, where comparisons could happen quietly. From what we observed, Mark said carefully, their meetings usually happened after events where both of you were around. The room became very still. It wasn't a love story unfolding on that screen. It was a competition. And somehow my marriage had become part of the scoreboard. I expected that realization to hurt more. Instead, it clarified something. The humiliation I felt earlier started to shift shape, not disappearing, but settling into something steadier. I closed the laptop. "That's enough," I said. Mark didn't push further. Professionals know when the important part of a job is finished. "Do you want copies of everything?" he asked. "Yes." He nodded and started organizing files. On the drive home, traffic moved slowly under the late afternoon sun. People crossed streets, shops opened and closed. Life continued with that quiet indifference cities always have. At home, my wife was in the kitchen. She looked up when I walked in. "You're early," she said. I nodded and set my keys down. For a moment, we stood there in the same ordinary house where we had spent years building routines, dinner plans, Weekend conversations, shared silence on tired evenings. None of it looked different. But something had shifted. Not dramatically, just enough. Over the next few days, I didn't confront her. I didn't ask questions. I didn't raise my voice. Our conversations stayed polite, careful. The silence between words started doing the work instead. She noticed it before long. One evening she asked, "Is something wrong?" I looked at her across the table. Really looked, not as my wife, just as a person sitting across from me. "There's something we need to talk about soon," I said calmly. Her shoulders stiffened slightly. "What kind of talk?" "A clear one." That was all. A few days later, we sat down in the living room. I placed a small folder on the table between us. No accusations, no speeches, just facts, photos, dates, moments. She didn't explode the way people do in movies. There was no shouting or dramatic confession. First, she denied it. Then she tried explaining it. And finally, the explanation started sounding thin even to her own ears. The strange part was how quickly the entire story shrank when spoken out loud. What once felt like a secret world between two people suddenly sounded small, petty, built, mostly on attention and comparison. Not love, not even passion, just ego. She sat quietly after that, embarrassed in a way that looked oddly familiar. I realized something in that moment. The humiliation I felt earlier had changed into distance, calm distance, not revenge, not victory, just clarity. And clarity, it turns out, is much quieter than people expect.